1,000 years ago, the Chinese used to put rice in people's mouth, and they would ask them a question. And then they would have them spit the rice out. Well, if the rice was dry, they were lying.
Stick to their mouth.
Yeah, they were lying. But if it was moist, then they were telling the truth.
Liar, liar, pants on fire. Body language and statement analysis with Eddie Pearson. Part 3 of 4. Warning. The podcast you're about to listen to may contain graphic descriptions of violent assaults, murder, and adult language. Listener discretion is advised.
Talking about that cognitive load, I think that's why I hit on that minuscule smoke screen, is that what I saw is that if they ran too hard, they're reducing that load that way.
Exactly.
And they get a lot of comfort because they're telling really solid truths in that moment.
Because they'll shut down on you.
That's it. So
As
soon as you said that about the cognitive load, I was like, you could feel that they were getting more comfortable from that. And I think that's why it's important to bring them in. But providing is a big deal.
What do you say instead of I understand?
I don't say anything.
You just say nothing.
Yeah, I don't say anything. Just let it go. There's a technique out there called elicitation, and I use this on my wife a couple times. Just to hope she's not listening.
That poor lady. I'm totally calling her when you leave.
She probably uses it on me, and I just not smart enough to pick it up, right? So, elicitation is basically you make a statement. It's how some of our government agencies recruit foreign spies. You make a statement, and you just let the statement go. Like, I'm sick of this rain. Don't say anything else. If you're in a conversation with somebody, like, I'm sick of this rain. I'm tired of mowing my grass. My grass is growing I got so many weeds because of this rain, and just stop talking. All right. My wife sent me a text. We went to go to lunch, and she sent me a text the other day, and I was having this conversation with somebody in my office. So she texts me and says that she's going to come by and pick me up. And I said, okay, just text me when you get to my office. So I'm having this conversation with this detective, and about the time my wife texts me, and I said, watch, I'll show you how this works. She said, I'm here. That was the text she sent me. And I said, I'm here. And I just repeated what she said and put a question mark behind it.
She said, Eddie, quit being so damn stupid.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm in the parking lot.
Yeah, she said, I'm in the parking lot. And I said, see, that's my point. You stop saying that, they will give you more information. It's called elicitation.
Yeah.
Works wonders. You try it in an interview, it works great.
Yeah.
So when I teach a lot of elicitation techniques. I said, just use them, you know. The worst thing that's going to happen is nothing. They're not going to say anything. And silence is golden. They say when you ask someone a question, the first person to speak is the person who loses. So if you ask someone, you know, did you steal that watch from Walmart or Kmart or wherever it's at, you know? Did you steal that watch from that retail store? And just stop talking.
Yeah.
And if they don't say anything, or are you the kind of person that would do this, or are you the kind, and you just keep asking them questions and they're just sitting there, you're losing. Don't say nothing.
Yeah.
And one of the hardest things to do is get detectives to stop talking. That's hard to do.
Yeah, you need them to fill the void because they will.
They will.
It may take longer than you and I are thinking that we want it to, but I agree with you. They have to be the first one that fills the void.
If I ask you a question and I stop talking, 5 seconds to me, maybe 20 seconds to you. Yeah. And they're like, I got to say something.
I think it's just that awkward pause. And I was sitting here thinking while you said that, and I went to one of my centers Thursday, and I walked in, and a little girl, she's 4, and somehow they start talking about their dogs and my mom's name's this, and so I've said what my mom's name was, and somehow a dog gets brought up, and I said, well, I played with my dog this morning. I'm trying to insert myself in the conversation with these kids, and she just looks at me and she goes, okay. And I was like, this is so awkward. I looked at the teacher and I'm like, so awkward.
So you got...
Like, she just said okay, and I was just like, thinking, I guess I was expecting her to ask me more questions.
So
like,
you got
what did you all
blown
play?
by a 4-year-old.
By a 4-year-old. I said, well, I played with my dog and we played Frisbee. And she goes, okay. I said, wow, this is really awkward.
Yeah.
I just walked off from
But
the
that's a
kid.
good example of what happens in here.
Yeah, you just feel
yeah.
like,
Yeah.
wow, I don't even know what to
Because
say now.
I think on the other side, what they're thinking is, if I don't talk, I'm gonna look like I'm lying.
Oh yeah.
That's it. And there's that cognitive load again.
I got
Yeah.
I got to explain this. Right?
Yeah, I can't let this sit.
So yeah. So it works wonders. I tell everybody, I said, use it. It works. It made that the body language cues and I encourage everybody. I said, listen, just go on YouTube. There's all kind of information on YouTube. There's tons of books out there. Read. I constantly read research papers. I get on Google Scholar, read all these research papers on body language. Body language has been around since basically the beginning of time. We all have children, and how do you communicate with your children before they start talking? Body language.
Mm-hmm.
When we was out here last time, we was looking at George, the horse, and I was asking David, I said, why does George stand with his foot like up, his hoof up like that? And so he explained it to me. Well, he knows that because of George's body language.
Yeah.
Now, he may be able to talk to George, I don't know, but if George came walking across the field, David could probably say he's not feeling good because I can recognize his body language. Well, our kids are the same way. If your kids go to school and they're walking up the driveway, you can look out the window. If they don't realize you're watching them, it's like, well, you had a bad day at school today.
Shoulders
Are slumped down. Right. And that's a good point. Speaking of shoulders, a lot of times when you interview people, you want to look at the distance between the earlobe and the shoulder, whatever that distance is. When that distance closes, when it gets smaller, that's an indicator. When people shrug their shoulders,
tense or something.
right, they'll get tense.
It's so funny you said that because the other night I was on my Peloton and the girl says, as we're starting to get ready to ride, she says, do some neck rolls. She says, move your shoulders from your ears. And I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
Because you'll get tense. Right.
Elongate
Right.
your spine
Right.
and pull your shoulders from your ears. And then I was like, wow, they were up there. I was just squatted down. But, it's so funny. You were talking about the communication. All I could think is texting my son, who's 17, and I'll send these little inspirationals, as I know the Life 360 tells me he's at school, and I'll say, have a great day, really focus on your test that you're going to take. You're going to do great today, and I love you. And you get back, okay.
Yeah.
I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
It's like,
But that's also, I think it's Jasper. I think it's generational.
Yeah, that's
I think
And he
it's
probably
just
knows
kids.
it drives
They're
you
just
nuts.
like,
That's
okay.
kids. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's,
Jasper knows how to push your buttons better than you know.
That's
so.
kids. Yeah.
If a 4-year-old can get you, you're 17-year-old.
Oh my gosh,
If
that
you've
little
been hit
girl.
by a car. You've been hit by a car.
Yeah. When your kids are, and my son did this when he first starts school, you take him to school and he gives you a big hug and he's, I'm going to school and he has a great day. Well, then when he gets about 9, he gives you that side hug thing. And you're like, and then when he gets a little older, you're like, oh, I don't need a hug. I'm good. And that's kids.
High school, it's like, drop me off 2 blocks away.
Yeah. Drop me off 2 blocks away.
I don't want anybody to know I got a parent.
Yeah. I don't want anybody to see,
Exactly.
yeah. I don't want anybody to see me with
This is
you.
BS.
That's kids.
Stranger danger. Right?
Yeah. But during an interview or an interrogation, I look at the shoulders. You'll see those shoulders tense up, and I've seen those shoulders tense up, and people will like put their legs up and put their feet in the chair, and they're like in the fetal position.
Yes, yeah.
I'm like, what's?
Oh, you need to unwind there.
Yeah, and then what you got to do is you got to get them to loosen up and open up. And like I said before, when you start talking about their emotional drivers, their kids, their family, their education, their business, their career, whatever, and you start talking about that. I remember interviewing, it just jumped into my head. I interviewed a lady one time that was a what do they call the handwriting?
Oh, what is that? I know it's handwriting analysis. Calligraphy?
Calligraphy.
Here we go.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I couldn't think of the name of the word. She was a calligraphist, and I'd never heard the word calligraphist. I said, what is that? She said, a handwriting. I said, oh, really? How does that work? And we talked like 40 minutes on her career, and I got very well educated.
Sure.
And so as I'm doing this, I kind of lost myself, and she's kind of teaching me. I'm not paying attention to her body language, but her body language opened up, and she's telling me this. And so at some point, I'm like, oh, I got to kind of get the train back on the track here. We need to talk about this. But I'm noticing her body language. But I got a great education from her. And she relaxed and told me everything she knew, all the training that she'd had and the universities that she had went to, and she'd worked this and done that for this bank, and she was one of the forensics people that do like check kiting and forgery, and she did that kind of stuff, and she was accused of doing a bunch of other stuff. But then I kind of said, oh, I need to get back on track here because she's giving me an education, but I'm not watching her body language because I got all this other stuff in my brain. And so, but then once I had that rapport built and I had that baseline of what her body language was, then I could go back and look for those changes and shifts, right? So, but like David was saying earlier, it's just so much information that's coming at you, and sometimes you miss it.
Yeah,
so,
it's hard.
So let me change just a little bit and talk about statement analysis. Statement analysis has been around since forever, pretty much. In the late 60s is when it kind of really started getting some momentum, some speed. I don't do handwriting analysis. We generally don't take handwritten statements from people. Some detectives do. I don't do it. But my statement analysis is kind of on the fly as I'm speaking with them. So when someone is talking to you about statement analysis, it's basically analyzing the words that people are saying and how they're saying them. For instance, if you're asking someone about, tell me what happened during the car wreck, everything they tell you about the collision will be in past tense because it's already happened.
Right.
Okay? And so one of the clues that someone's being deceptive when it comes to statement analysis is they start changing the tense from past tense to present tense. Right. The present tense is the part that they're making up. Okay. For instance, I interviewed a lady one time that was accused of stealing a night deposit from her business. They would give her the night deposit. She would take it to the bank and drop it in the night deposit box at the bank. Remember, I don't think they do that anymore, but it used to be like a big mailbox arm thing, and you put it in and close it, right? Well, she pulled up, and then somebody came up to her, pointed a gun at her, stole the bag, and took off running. Well, when I'm asking her this, and we're interviewing her, and I'm telling her, tell me the route you took, tell me this, tell me everything she's telling me is in past tense. But the part about this guy opening the door and pointing the gun at her, she changes to present tense.
He opens the door,
right.
not
she
opened the door.
Right. She changed to present tense, and then he ran off, and this is the way he ran, past tense. So I was like, this is a problem.
Yeah.
Right. So we went back and I talked to her about it, and she eventually said it was her boyfriend. They had set it up. He met her there. She gave him the money. She called the police and said she was robbed, and she wasn't. It was her boyfriend. But the only way I found that could figure that out is because she changed the tense of what she was talking about.
Interesting.
So it's very hard. It's very subtle, but you can pick up on it. I listen for articles, A and the. A car approached, a man got out, pointed a gun at me, and demanded my wallet. If someone makes that statement versus the car approached, the man got out, pointed the gun at me, and demanded my wallet. The only two differences is the article A and the. If someone says, a man, a car, a gun, they probably don't know the man, the car, or the gun. Probably never seen him before. But if they say the man, they know who he is. They've seen him before. The car, right? The gun, they know, they have some more information about it. All right. So a lot of times people say, well, the bartender threw me out of the bar versus a bartender. Well, they know who the bartender is because they've been in the bar drinking.
Yeah, good idea.
Right.
Yeah,
so you kind of listen for that. Listen for those article changes. A lot of times you'll hear people that are being deceptive. They'll drop pronouns. I'll say, Wendy, what time did you get up this morning? Tell me everything that happened from 5 o'clock this morning till noon. Got up at 5 o'clock, took a shower, washed my hair, ate breakfast, got in the car, went to work. Didn't use one personal pronoun. I got up at 5 o'clock. I washed my hair. When people use the word I, we, us, them, they're taking possession.
Kind of owning that.
Yeah, they take possession of it, right? So a lot of times what people do is when they're deceptive, they will drop those personal pronouns. That way it doesn't tie them to the action.
There we go.
So you'll see them
A
there.
little bit dissonance.
Right.
Yeah.
Distance.
I think people need to learn how to lie better. Maybe after this, Eddie.
No, they don't. No, they don't. No.
Yeah.
No, it makes our
You're
job.
giving away all the secrets, I
Yeah.
feel like.
But can I say something? And sometimes I think about that. And even on the show, sometimes there's things we don't talk about in specifics because I don't want to arm people. But I will say this, just like you said, you had people sit the right way. Right. They can know. And it's subconscious, and it's physiological, and it's part of our amygdala, it's part of our limbic system. I'm going to tell you, people can know everything he's saying,
I think it's so subconscious. You just still do it
And
anyway.
I think most of our audience probably won't be in an interview room. I'm just going to give them props for that.
Yeah, let's hope not. Yeah.
And if you're tuning in for the other thing, I'd just look right at people and tell them, you'll screw this up. You could
I think
read.
it becomes so subconscious. You don't think
What is? It's
a man
it's
or
human behavior.
the man. And I was sitting at this road, and I think it becomes so subconscious. So when people
That's
ask
it.
you can answer like that, or you're
It's
a
really
man.
it's out of your control.
Yeah.
You
Yes.
could read all the research papers, go to every school.
Yeah, yeah.
You could become a polygrapher, and probably under pressure when you're lying, I think somebody could get through to you.
When that cognitive load increases,
Yeah.
it's extremely, extremely difficult to control all. I'm not saying it can't be done, but it takes a tremendous amount of practice.
Yeah, I mean, look at our kids, right? I mean, when they're young, look at when we were kids. And, cognitive load, we could give it other names like a spanking back then. But what I'm getting at is that, but listen, we've all sensed that when we're confronted when we're a kid with dishonesty from our parents or whatever. And all of those emotions really don't change into adulthood because they're wired in. And so load is the right word. I'm glad, because like when you were talking, and I'm glad you got to the point about the movement of the chairs and things like that, is I don't want a place where they can dissipate that energy and ride that energy off except body language and verbally.
Right.
And so again, we could, even, because I joked, I think when I promoted your polygraph piece is like, I think part of the promotional part I did is like tune in and learn how to lie. I mean, like, you need to lie. Are you going to a polygraph tomorrow? I got a show for you. It's like, but because there are people that they're like, I'm going to find the secret, right? I'm going to find the secret.
It reminds me, you see him rub his hands like that?
Yeah. Scheming, wasn't he, Eddie?
When you're dealing with somebody, if they rub their hands real fast like that, it's probably a good deal for you and them. Like if you're going to go buy a new car. You're talking to the salesman, and the numbers look good. You're happy. He's happy. He's rubbing his hands real fast. It's probably a pretty good deal for you and him.
Mm-hmm.
If they rub their hands slow, it's probably only a good deal for just the one person.
Ooh.
Why?
Because the slow, you ever seen when I was a kid, there was a cartoon on, there was this cat, and this cat would say, yeah, I'm going to get that little rat.
Yes.
And he would rub his hands real slow,
Yes.
conniving,
That's
scheming.
what I was going to say.
There we go.
That's that's exactly what it is. So I'm going to get him on this deal. All right.
And how
Versus, I'm so excited. Let's go.
So when you go to the restaurant and you say, what do you recommend? Well, and you see them rub those hands real slow, and you're like, I think I'll take the lasagna.
Yeah, they're thinking about that chicken that
Yeah, they're
sat out
thinking
last
about
night.
Yeah. Right. So
We can unload that on him.
yeah. So I seen him do that, and I was like, ooh, let me talk about this.
I love it.
And I hate, and I'm sorry.
Your poor
I mean,
wife probably, bless her, I have to say this again. I got to get her back out here because
No, let's not do
I
that.
just think she just needs to sit in a chair at home and don't even make eye contact. And you know what? Put a bandana on, ma'am, because he's going to look at your forehead.
Yeah, but
keep your bangs down.
But I'll say this too, that even when you're not trained in it, I think there's, like we said, we measure that in other people. When you go back to who we are as creatures, that is all part of the fundamental thing of how we survive and thrive.
I use
Go ahead. Yeah.
I use these things called themes. It's the read technique,
Right.
and most police officers have been trained in them. I use this thing called the read technique, and I develop themes. And themes are basically a reason for someone to admit to doing something. And a lot of times people say, "Well, I just don't remember. I can't remember that." And you talked about the amygdala. The way my brain works is I'll hear something will click, and I'm like, I need to talk about that. You mentioned the amygdala, and I'll say, "Well, listen, that's not the way memory works. Memory doesn't work that way. What do you mean? You remembered all the way back to you were in the 5th grade when you skipped school. You remember the lyrics to a song, the Star Spangled Banner? That song's over 200 years old, and you can still remember the lyrics to that song. So you can't remember what you did last month? I'm not buying that."
Yeah.
I say, because that's not how memory works. Your memory works this way. Let's say, for instance, you leave here today, and I go back to telling them they're leaving today. You leave here today, and you go out here to this parking lot. You get in your car, and you pull out of the parking lot. You're going to make a left or a right, okay? Even if you you turn the wrong way, that's no big deal. That portion of your memory is made by the prefrontal cortex in your brain. So if you make a decision and you go right and you should have went left, well, you can just go down here to the 4-way stop, do a U-turn, and come back. No big deal. Nobody cares, okay? It's a mistake. Nobody cares. What happens is when we start using alcohol, illegal drugs. We start making mistakes that we normally, that are outside of our character. Our amygdala makes that decision. So let's say you pull out of this parking lot and you're going to make a left or right, but I'm in the passenger seat yelling and screaming, make a left, hurry up, make a decision, do this, do that. And there's smoke and there's gunfire and there's people behind you honking the horn. That cognitive load in your brain increases, that pressure increases. When that happens, the amygdala kicks in and makes that decision. The amygdala doesn't always make the best decisions for us.
That's why we call it the lizard brain.
Exactly. It's the lizard brain, right? And so that it doesn't always make the best decision. So when those decisions are made, like having sexual contact with your granddaughter, it's probably a mistake. It's not anything that was done intentionally because you didn't intentionally try to hurt her. So it's either a mistake or it's something that a predator would do intentionally. Now, I don't think you're a predator, but if I'm wrong, you let me know. I think this is a mistake. What I don't know is this mistake happened once, twice, or has it been happening since she was 5 years old? Which one is it?
You make them pick a lesser of evils.
Lesser of two evils.
Literally.
Lesser of two evils.
But so I guess if he says it's never happened,
Mm.
there's no mistake, it's never happened.
Well, if that's true, then you would have never failed the polygraph test. Because people come in every day of the week and pass these tests that are 100% honest. That's the problem.
Yeah.
So then we go back.
Yeah.
And we just go back and go back. And so one of the questions I asked him, I says, during the interviews, what do you think should happen to a person that did this? And they're like, well, I didn't do it. That's not my question.
Yeah.
My question is, what do you think, if someone did this, what do you think should happen to that other person? I can usually tell if they're guilty at that point because most people won't punish themselves.
There we go.
They'll say, well, they should have some counseling, or it was a mistake, just forget it, it won't happen again. If somebody says, well, they need to be castrated or put under the jail or they need to be hung from the high water, a lot of way they answer those behavioral analysis questions can determine on what they think about why they're there. So it doesn't happen. It doesn't work all the time, but then that goes back to those statement analyses about how they answer those questions. Okay. And I tell everybody, I says, when we're talking, if you're talking about yourself, that's fine. If you refer to anybody else other than yourself, don't say us, them, they, we, because I don't know who those people are. Mm-hmm. So if you say we went to the store, just tell me and Bob went to the store. All right, So, and I have them tell me that, again, that increases that cognitive load because it's like counting backwards from 57 to 32. You got to remember where to start and when to stop, and you got to remember all those numbers in between. So that increases that cognitive load. So when they're telling me the story, that cognitive load increases. It makes it harder for them to lie to me if I keep that cognitive load increased versus letting it come back down. I tell everybody, I said, if anybody uses an ly word, basically, generally, usually, directly, there's always more information.
Sure.
Ly equals lie. Mm-hmm. So if I say, all right, when you tell me what you do for a living? Well, basically, I do this, blah, 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 blah. Okay, hold on, let's back up. There's going to be a lot more to that story. Mm-hmm. Right? You're just giving me the short version. So if you ask somebody, says, tell me what happened yesterday. Well, basically, we got up and so I just let them tell me the whole entire story. Don't interrupt them. And then I go back and I was like, basically, ly word, that's a lie. So let's talk about this. I say that to myself. Right? Yeah, I don't say it to them. And so then I go back and start asking questions. A guy told me one time he was being investigated. He was involved in a hit and run collision where he killed a 12-year-old girl on a bicycle. So I said, tell me what you did. Went through the whole thing. And he said, basically what he said was, he drove to the store, bought soda and chips, and drove directly home. So I was like, I thought to myself, directly, ly word, there's more information there. Mm-hmm. So then I went back and I gave him a piece of paper. I said, draw the store where you were parked at. And when you left the store, which way did you turn? And we broke it down step by step by step by step. And as we were breaking it down step by step by step, he said a dog ran out in front of him and he hit the dog and he kept going. Okay. Well, he never told anybody that before. And it was rainy. It's kind of rainy, dark night. And I was like, it wasn't a dog. That was the girl on the bike that he hit. Now, he finally went back and said he thought he had hit someone, but he originally said it was a dog. And then he changed it that he thought that he hit someone, but he didn't want to stop because he just thought it was a dog. Well, it was a girl. He hit the little girl on the bicycle. So he kind of it was more of an admission than a confession. But anyway, he ends up going to court, and he was found guilty for it. But we got that additional information while I was talking to him, just on the word directly, because I knew that it ended with ly. It's a lie. There's more information about it. We'll go back. I'll break it down. And he said that he hit the dog, and he had never told him about that information before.
Super logical.
Yeah.
Because he's not lying. He went directly home.
Yeah, he did.
But there was an incident, and again, breaking it down into the segments and the pieces, put him in the area. There we go. That's the difference again, too, is even if you got him in the area to commit that he was on those paths.
So did he stick to his guns that I really thought it was a dog, or did he say, well, okay, I knew it was a kid because I saw the bicycle?
He never said, I knew it was a kid. He said he thought he hit a dog. I said, no, you hit a little girl on a bicycle. Now, if that was me, I'd have said, absolutely not. That was a dog. I saw the dog. I swerved. I missed the dog. He never did anything. He never defended himself. And when I said it was a girl on a bicycle, he stopped, leaned forward, puts his hand up like that
Got
on his
those
head.
ears over that heart,
Ears
didn't
over
he?
that heart. And I was like, so you either hit her on purpose, you swerved towards her and hit her, or it was a mistake. You swerved and you tried to miss her, and at the last second, you clipped her and went on. You got scared, you didn't stop, and you went straight home. He never denied doing it, but he never admitted to doing it either. Yeah. So,
Still, you gave him the less of evils to balance.
So he just
two completely different outcomes.
Exactly.
If you know, that,
I said you either intentionally hit her, you swerved to try to scare her, or you swerved away. You saw her the last second, swerved away from her, you hit her, and you got scared, you went home. I said, but you know, and I know it wasn't a dog. You know that.
Yeah.
And you see him lean forward, and you know. So then he starts asking me questions about her. Is she okay? And I was like, I said, I really don't know. And I knew she was dead, but I wasn't going to tell him. I said, I really don't know because it's not I'm not a doctor. I don't know how she's doing. I'm just concerned about the collision. So, but he never actually came out and said, yeah, I hit her. He never did that. But he knew he did. Right? So anyway, but we got the rest of that information on the ly word. So, uncompleted actions. Like if somebody says, I think I'm going to go buy me a new pair of shoes. What kind of shoes did you get? Oh, I didn't get any. I just said I was thinking about going, Right. So if someone says, yeah, I decided to plead guilty when I went to court. My next question is, did you go to court? Yeah. Did you plead guilty in court? Oh, no, my lawyer told me I shouldn't do it. So if you listen to uncompleted action verbs, you need to go back and ask more questions about that. So because a lot of times people will give you an uncompleted action verb, and you just assume that the action was completed.
Yeah.
And I've done it. I do it all the time. And I got to force myself to go back and say, okay, so did you go to court? Well, yeah. So you decided not to plead guilty in court, correct? Did you go to court? Yes. So when you got in court, did you plead guilty? Oh, no, my lawyer told me not to do that. Okay. So you don't want to assume the action was completed until you
just
ask.
Because he said it was.
Yeah, because that's a good way to try to walk you away from it. I mean,
They'll start smoke screening. They'll
that's
pull you
it.
off the path and take you down to another road somewhere.
it's kind of like road closed, go right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
if you, I love it. I love
Yeah.
it.
So you got to listen for those action words. So, as you're talking to someone, all that comes into play about what they're saying. Like I said, I have them tell me the story. I never give them a starting point unless I want to lock them into a time. And I have them tell me the entire story, and then I have them tell me the story backwards. Okay. So I got home, and I got home at 9:00, and then that's what happened. So what time did you get home? 9:00. Well, tell me again what happened just before that, and then I'll start going backwards through the story. So if they add more information, they're probably telling me the truth about the forward motions of the story. But when they have to stop and think, what did I tell him just before? I can't remember. Yeah, that's a problem.
Good point.
We got-
because if
we
they're
got an
walking
issue.
back and they're telling the truth, now they're recovering memories
Yeah, they don't
that
think
they
about
went
it.
through and that are important. But I like that too. But if you've lied, there we go. You remembering, like you said, of those 6 things.
Yeah, and now those 6 things have to kick in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you got to remember, and it's hard to do. Think about that. And when I teach a class, I make everybody stand up. I said, I want everybody to stand up. Everybody in class stands up. I said, I want you to walk around the room backwards. Everybody starts walking backwards. Now, every time your left foot strikes the floor, I want you to clap your hands. So now they're walking backwards, left foot strikes the floor, and they're clapping their hands. Now, every time you clap your hands, I want you to start at 57 and count backwards to 32. And you'll see people, that's that cognitive load increase. Right.
It's
I
too
said,
much.
that's cognitive load.
Yeah.
So when you're interviewing somebody and you're having them tell the story backwards, that cognitive load increases, and you want to keep it up because now it's much harder to lie to you. So, that's just some of the techniques that you can use when it comes to those statement analysis. Listen for emotional words. I love those children. I really feel bad for those kids. So when you start asking them questions, you use emotional words to ask them the questions. You can also use mirroring words, right? If someone says, I didn't steal that book. That book? You can just repeat the last 2 or 3 words.
Yeah.
And then stop talking. It's an elicitation technique, Well, I didn't break that window. That window? Yeah. Now I may have broken some windows before, but I didn't break that one.
Yeah.
So let's talk about those windows you broke, or I didn't break into that yellow car. The yellow car. I might have broke into the blue. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you can mirror those words. So you can go back and some people call it parroting, some people call it mirroring. You can go back and you can mirror those words. All you're doing is you're giving them an opportunity to provide you more information. And they'll, like David said earlier, that silence is golden. It seems you stop talking and they have to fill that void. Guilty people generally have to do that. People that are innocent, they won't do it.
I think they'll just stare at you.
They'll just look at you. Yeah.
Yeah. Because again, like you said, the truth is the truth, and if you're comfortable with the truth and you're under no load at that moment, it's a whole different ball of wax. But when people are under that load, I just, like I said, I keep going back to there. It's kind of when you step away from it.
Yeah.
It's kind of neat because you're watching it, and I remember. I don't know if I shared it before, but I had a guy one time that when I got done with everything I needed from him, I had noticed that whenever I would get to the core questions on the case, he would cottonmouth up right here. So we're done, and I'm like, I had time. So what I would do is just started talking to him, and every now and then I'd go back to the thing, and I'd be like, in my mind, I'm like, there it is. And I'd back off and get comfortable again, and it would go away. And I'd come back into it, and he'd get cottonmouth again. I finally quit 3 or 4 times because I had shit to do. But at the same time, it's like when you can step away and you can see it, you're like, wow, that means something, It
reminds me of something I need to talk about, and I'm glad you brought this up. Cottonmouth. Right? When you lie, cognitive load increases in your brain. Cortisol enters the bloodstream. Your blood goes from the extremities of your body to the center core of your body to protect all your vital organs. Okay, mouth starts to dry up. You'll get cotton mouth, and your eyes will start to dry. So something that nobody ever talks about, blink rate. When you talk to people, look at their eyes. Most people blink about 15 to 18 blinks per minute. Okay, when cognitive load increases, 1 or 2 things are going to occur. They're really going to start blinking fast because their eyes are starting to dry out, so they need to lubricate the eyes, or that blink rate will go down to like 4 blinks a minute. If you're playing a video game, you're reading a book, you're watching a movie, if you look at someone's eyes as they're watching the movie, that blink rate will really slow down because that cognitive load increases. They're concentrating on the movie, playing the video game, watching the book. All right, the opposite occurs. All right, they'll start blinking real fast to try to lubricate the eyes. When people lie to you, you look for that deviation. So as you're talking to somebody, a lot of times you'll see me, detectives have asked me, they'll see me sitting in a room and I'll be going like this with my fingers. What I'm doing is I'm counting their blink rates with my fingers. Okay. How many blinks? So I do it for like 15 seconds. So I'll count their blink rates as I'm asking them questions and talking to them, looking at their baseline. So then when I ask them about stealing the watch and their blink rate dramatically increases, I'm like, why did the blink rate dramatically increase when I ask about the watch? But it didn't increase when I asked them about their children's grades in school. Yeah. So I'll look for that deviation in that baseline. So there's a lot of times that people, and and everybody looks at people when they talk to them, but nobody ever looks at their eye blink rate.
Good point.
Nobody ever does it. And I never did it until I started doing some research and I started finding out about, there's a lot of papers and stuff out there written on the cognitive load and how it increases the blink rate, how it will change based on that cognitive load. So then I go back and I start thinking about DUIs that I'd done in the past. and I'm looking at people when I'm giving them the HGN, horizontal gaze nystagmus test, and I'm looking at their blink rates. And I noticed that people that were not intoxicated, I didn't see a big difference in the change. But anytime I could notice that someone's eyes, the HGN really set off, you could see them blink their eyes a whole lot, and it was real red and they're glassy, and they blinked their eyes a lot. And so I'm thinking of, why, at the time when I was doing it, I didn't know why it happened. But now, going back and researching it and looking and watching these interviews, a lot of times I'll sit there when I'm talking to somebody, I'll just look at their blink rate.
Yeah, good point.
And I'm like, well, I need to go back and, it doesn't mean they're lying. I just need to go back and ask them the questions about why did it change at that point. So now I'll go back and start asking them those questions. But when those mucous membranes start to dry out, you'll see those little white protein marks on the side of their mouth. And 1,000 years ago, the Chinese used to put rice in people's mouth, and they would ask them a question. And then they would have them spit the rice out. Well, if the rice was dry, they were lying.
Stick to their mouth.
Yeah, they were lying. But if it was moist, then they were telling the truth. That was one of the lie detection techniques they used, hundreds of years ago in China.
Chinese secret.
Ancient
Yeah,
Chinese
exactly.
secret,
They were onto something.
Yeah,
That's right.
exactly. And again, you can't control that.
You can't.
That's what I'm saying is that these physiological and things that happen, like the chemicals that get pushed through our body, are there for a reason. They've been there forever. Hopefully, that's why we're alive again. But you can't control that. You can walk in and think you can control that, but you won't be able to. I think that's what's brilliant about it. So,
A lot of times you'll ask people questions. They'll give you a referral statement.
Hey, there's more to the story, so go download the next episode like the true crime fan that you are.
the Murder Police podcast is hosted by Wendy and David Lyons and was created to honor the lives of crime victims, so their names are never forgotten. It is produced, recorded, and edited by David Lyons. The Murder Police podcast can be found on your favorite Apple or Android podcast platform, as well as at murderpolicepodcast.com, where you will find show notes, transcripts, information about our presenters, and a link to the official Murder Police Podcast merch store, where you can purchase a huge variety of Murder Police Podcast swag. We are also on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, which is closed caption for those that are hearing impaired. Just search for the Murder Police Podcast and you will find us. If you have enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe for more and give us 5 stars and a written review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you download your podcasts. Make sure you set your player to automatically download new episodes so you get the new ones as soon as they drop. And please tell your friends. Lock it down, Judy.